I once saw a photograph from a historical archive that, well, it's haunted me for years.
Yeah.
On the stand, there's this man, so frail, he looks like a stiff breeze could just shatter his bones. His voice was apparently a thin rasp, and his eyes, they just darted around with this unmistakable cowardice, the kind of person who's never won a physical fight in his life.
Right.
And yet in the front row, you see this group of battle-hardened men soldiers, scars etched into their skin, and they're sitting in absolute trembling silence.
Just listening.
Obeying. Any one of them could have stood up and ended him with a single hand, but they didn't move. And it's a scene that just defies every law of nature we think we understand.
It really does. I mean, in the wild, the silverback leads because he is the strongest.
Exactly. The alpha wolf rules because he's the fiercest. But humans, we have this bizarre, almost logic-defying habit of letting the weak, the fearful, and sometimes the outright foolish command the strong.
We see it all through history.
We watch as thousands of men in their prime march to their deaths, all because a person who couldn't survive a schoolyard scrap gave a single order. For a long time, I thought this was just a fluke of culture, maybe a collective delusion.
A mistake of history.
But when you look deeper into our evolutionary history, you find this chilling transition. It turns out our capacity for kindness, our morality, and our stable societies weren't built on a foundation of peace.
Not at all.
They were built on a very specific, very cold type of violence. We aren't good because we lost our edge. We're civilized because thousands of years ago, we learned how to gather in the dark and collectively execute the bullies.
We domesticated ourselves.
Through a mechanism so calculated that it changed the very fabric of our species. This paradox, that our greatest virtues are rooted in our most sinister ability to conspire, is the only reason a coward can become a king. It is the hidden, bloody blueprint of human power.
That is a deeply unsettling thought.
It is, isn't it? And it lays out the exact mission for this deep dive. We are tracing that blueprint, that chilling, collective, cold act of violence from its origins thousands of generations ago.
All the way up to today.
Right up through how it shaped not just human morality, but also the most coordinated and destructive political movements of the modern era, particularly within the radical right.
And it forces us to confront what some call the goodness paradox. You have to ask yourself, why are humans simultaneously so astonishingly tolerant, so friendly and benign in our daily interactions?
Far more than other primates, right?
Oh, absolutely. But at the same time, we maintain this terrifyingly high rate of killing each other, and often with systematic planning and just callous cruelty.
So we're one of the least reactively aggressive species, but one of the most proactively aggressive.
Exactly. That's the paradox right there.
The contrast is essential. I think before we go any further, we really need to drill down on what those two types of aggression actually look like, because it feels like the key to understanding all of this.
It absolutely is. We can distinguish between two main types. So first you have reactive aggression.
Okay.
This is the hot aggression. It's spontaneous, it's visceral, and it's always tied to some intense emotion, like a loss of temper.
So like a toddler having a screaming fit in the supermarket.
That's a perfect example. Or a silverback gorilla violently lashing out at a challenger. It's all about an immediate reaction to a threat or a status challenge. This is that classic powerful bully behavior that we see resolving dominance in almost every non-human primate group.
Okay, so that's the hot reactive type. What's the other one?
The other is proactive aggression, and this is the cold stuff. It is premeditated, it's calculated, often unemotional, and it's goal-directed.
It's a plan.
It's a plan. It requires communication, cooperation. It's not a reaction, it's a deliberate action. Think of a hunter calculating the ambush of prey, or in a much darker context, planning a murder.
When you lay them out like that, the unique human twist becomes so clear.
It does. I mean, look at chimpanzees. They exhibit high rates of both reactive and proactive aggression. They'll fly into a rage, but they'll also form raiding parties to systematically kill neighbors.
And bonobos are the opposite.
Famously so. Low rates of both.
Yeah.
But humans, we present this radical decoupling. We have an incredibly high propensity for proactive aggression. We are masterful planners of calculated violence, but a surprisingly low propensity for reactive aggression.
Which is what allows us to be tolerant.
Yeah.
It lets us live together in these huge, dense cities without constantly flying into a rage over every little slight.
Exactly. So that old philosophical battle, are we naturally aggressive like Huxley thought, or naturally peaceful like Rousseau argued? It's kind of rendered obsolete, isn't it?
It seems so. We're both. But the peace is a planned for state. It's not our natural default. And the aggression is cold and cooperative.
Precisely. We are the ultimate social engineers, capable of astonishing cooperation. Specifically when that cooperation is directed toward a calculated, violent goal.
So let's rewind. Let's go back about, 120,000 years or so before Homo sapiens fully emerged as we know them. The social dynamics in those early hominid groups were probably much closer to chimpanzees.
Almost certainly. The rules would have been brutally simple. Conflicts are resolved by the best individual fighter. And that's the classic alpha male problem.
Right. The biggest, meanest guy wins.
That's right. The alpha male, through sheer physical dominance and just frequent use of that reactive aggression, threat displays, physical force, seizing resources, he maintained a rigid dominance hierarchy.
He's a bully.
He's the ultimate bully. He monopolized sexual access, he monopolized the best food, and the survival and status of everyone else depended entirely on his whim. This creates an incredibly high-stress, dangerous environment for everyone else in the group.
Especially the weaker beta males.
Particularly them. They're constantly under threat.
Which begs the obvious question. How did we escape that? I mean, if the alpha is, by definition, the strongest, how could the betas ever hope to overthrow him? They couldn't do it one-on-one.
They couldn't. And that's why the unique human solution was, it was a truly revolutionary mechanism. Targeted conspiratorial killing, or TCK.
TCK.
The execution hypothesis posits that the entire edifice of human morality, of stable social structure, it all emerged directly from this specific male political dynamic.
And you're saying this wasn't just a spontaneous mob action, like a riot. This was calculated.
Oh, it was the ultimate expression of proactive aggression. An alliance of beta males who individually posed no threat whatsoever to the alpha.
Right.
They gathered, they conspired, and they killed the domineering alpha male. And they succeeded because they relied on two uniquely human traits that were rapidly improving at the time: language and cooperation.
So they could plan it in secret?
They could plan the act secretly, they could ambush the target, and they could ensure the kill was executed cheaply.
And cheaply here means at low risk to the conspirators, right?
Yeah.
Because the alpha was ambushed when he was vulnerable or asleep or just outnumbered.
Exactly. It's a calculated risk assessment. And the sources are clear that this systematic practice of tyrannicide, of killing the tyrant, was so effective that males with extreme domineering, reactive tendencies were killed regardless of their familial connections, even if he was your brother.
Wow. So this wasn't personal rivalry. This was political engineering.
That's the perfect term for it.
Yeah.
They eliminated not just the individual bully, but the entire role of the alpha male from the human social structure.
That elimination must have had monumental, permanent evolutionary consequences. I mean, if all the biggest bullies, the most reactively aggressive men, were consistently being taken out by a collective firing squad generation after generation,
then selection is now working against reactive aggression.
It's a complete reversal.
It is the pivotal insight. Because these domineering males died young or they failed to reproduce, the genes underlying that hyper-reactive aggression, the very traits associated with the classic alpha male, were systematically purged from the human gene pool over thousands of generations.
And the result was?
The result was nothing less than a global, species-wide self-domestication syndrome.
Self-domestication. It's a term we hear a lot, but what does that actually look like physically? How does cold violence literally change our bodies?
It's fascinating. When you domesticate any animal, say wolves into dogs or wild foxes in those famous Russian experiments, you select against aggression, and a whole suite of specific physical changes just follows.
And we see that same pattern in ourselves.
We see the exact same pattern when you compare Homo sapiens to our immediate, more robust ancestors like Homo heidelbergensis.
So what are those signature changes? What should we be looking for in the fossils?
There are several key markers. You see a reduction in the brow ridge prominence. Our faces become flatter, the shortening of the face itself, a reduction in canine tooth size, and just a general decrease in skeletal robustness. We become more gracile.
Less physically intimidating.
Exactly. Domestication also typically leads to a smaller cranial volume, which is interesting. In humans, we maintained a large brain, but with less pronounced sexual dimorphism, so males and females look more alike and a different overall structure.
And it's not just bones, right? It affects our biology too.
Oh, definitely. Physiologically, self-domestication is linked to changes in hormone levels, a decrease in baseline testosterone, and crucially, a slower maturation rate. We essentially become more juvenile looking. The technical term is paedomorphic.
But we have smoother, less intimidating faces.
All of it. This process literally created the docile, tolerant human that we recognize today.
So the capacity for planned, cold violence is what produced the anatomical characteristics of civility. That is genuinely astonishing.
It's the central paradox.
And this elimination of the alpha role.
Yeah.
It also created a completely new social order, didn't it?
Yes, it did. It created what anthropologists call the reverse dominance hierarchy, or RDH. Since the alpha was gone, the ultimate power structure flipped on its head.
How so?
The multi-male alliance, the collective, became the dominant authority in the group. And because of that, relationships within that powerful coalition had to be strictly egalitarian.
Okay, so the RDH means the group as a whole is dominant over any single individual. If I'm thinking of a modern analogy, it's almost like a corporate board of directors.
Go on.
Any single powerful executive might control a department. They might be a star player. But if they try to seize total power or dominate the other members, the collective vote of the board, the alliance, can immediately terminate them.
That analogy is perfect. The power rests with the majority coalition, not the strongest individual.
So the key constraint of this RDH is that every potential tyrant, every ambitious person, remains perpetually vulnerable to being killed by the egalitarian group.
It's a constant check on power. This mechanism ensures that a kind of equality is maintained among the coalition members by constantly and ruthlessly suppressing individual attempts at domination.
But wait. If the goal was to achieve equality within the coalition, doesn't that inherently require a new form of tyranny? The tyranny of the majority.
Ah!
I mean, aren't they just trading one bully for 100?
That's the chilling implication, isn't it? The source of our tolerance is the collective threat of calculated death. The group maintains its power by enforcing conformity.
And that leads to the second critical pathway of TCK.
The execution of the antisocial.
This is where morality comes into the picture.
Precisely. Group members learned norms, and of course these norms vary wildly by culture, but they were emotionally hardwired to conform. And that drive to conform was powered by the innate primal fear of severe punishment or death at the hands of this powerful male alliance.
It created what you call a norm psychology.
A profound norm psychology. An immediate emotional tendency to acquire norms, comply with them, and punish anyone who violates them.
So when we make a moral judgment, it's often not the result of some slow, conscious reasoning. It's more of a gut reaction.
It's overwhelmingly fast and automatic. The neural regions that engage when we assess morality, they light up faster than the ones involved in slower, more consciously reasoned reactions. This tendency to obey the group, to feel guilt and shame when you violate a norm.
As an echo.
It's the unintended legacy of roughly 12,000 generations where nonconformity could mean a quick, organized execution. And this entire system, it primarily benefits the males who belong to the alliance by ensuring the safety and stability of their collective power structure.
And the ultimate mechanism for enforcing this conformity, even today, in societies that don't have sophisticated legal systems, it remains capital punishment.
It is the only known systematic deterrent against extreme, tyrannical, domineering behavior when the nonviolent methods, ridicule, gossip, ostracism, when those fail.
Right.
Anthropological records show that among hunter-gatherers worldwide, this execution is overwhelmingly carried out by men, and it's almost always planned in advance. It is the cold, calculated collective murder, the TCK, that maintains the peace and the structure of the reverse dominance hierarchy.
Okay, so to sum up this first part, our low levels of spontaneous reactive aggression are a direct result of the fact that we mastered high levels of collective proactive aggression.
The most dangerous human trait was the tool we used to produce our most socially peaceful trait, tolerance and conformity.
But the danger, and this is the key transition, is that this capacity for cold, calculated conspiracy can be repurposed.
And that takes us directly to the 1960s. After millennia of using TCK to suppress the internal bully, society had become so complex that proactive coalitions could now target much broader, more abstract concepts.
Not just one person anymore.
Not at all. Now the targets were the system, liberal tyranny, communists, or specific marginalized groups who were defined as the new enemy. The state, or the current social order, it became the new alpha male bully that needed to be overthrown by a collective.
And this shift didn't happen in a vacuum. I mean, we see the emergence of intense youth activism in the 60s, both on the political left and the political right.
Absolutely. This set the stage for these new coalitionary dynamics. You have all these young men frustrated by perceived social failures, and they're actively looking for mechanisms to exercise real political power.
And in this environment, a key bridge figure emerges, a seemingly mainstream group that was able to channel a lot of that youth frustration.
Yeah.
And that was the Young Americans for Freedom, or YAF.
Right, YAF. This was a conservative youth group. It was well-funded by big names like William F. Buckley Jr., and it was intended to be the respectable, clean-cut face of the student right.
And the sources show that YAF in their public platforms, they were careful to avoid overtly racist language. Instead, they weaponized these abstract concepts like liberty and states' rights.
But that was a very tactical political choice, wasn't it? It allowed them to align explicitly with open segregationists. It provided a comfortable political home for anyone who is primarily concerned with maintaining the racial status quo.
You just have to look at their alliances. They enthusiastically championed Barry Goldwater. And Goldwater, despite his massive national defeat in 1964, successfully carried 5 Deep South states.
Precisely because his platform focused on states' rights and opposition to federal intervention.
Which everyone at the time understood to mean opposition to the Civil Rights Act.
Of course. And this wasn't just a passive alignment on YAF's part. Their own publication, The New Guard, actively celebrated figures like Strom Thurmond,
the famous segregationist who filibustered the 1957 Civil Rights Act for nearly 24 hours.
And YAF's magazine labeled him a man of courage.
Wow.
Their editor, a man named Antony Golan, went even further. He actively condemned the black activist groups, specifically CORE's protests, calling them divisive and unnecessary. He wasn't just opposing their methods, he was recasting the entire civil rights movement as a sinister communist front operation.
So not a response to legitimate systemic racial violence.
No, in their view, it was a communist plot. They were using anti-communism as the ideological framework to justify racial protectionism. It was a calculated, proactive use of language to rationalize supporting white normativity.
And here's the crucial turning point. Goldwater's overwhelming defeat in 1964. For so many of these passionate young YAM members, this was proof that mainstream electoral politics were a complete dead end.
Their calculated political lobbying had failed. It hadn't stopped the perceived erosion of traditional America.
And this massive frustration made them intensely ripe for future, more extreme and revolutionary causes that promised not just talk, but decisive, aggressive action against this perceived liberal tyranny.
The electoral failure created a vacuum, and that vacuum was immediately filled by leaders who understood exactly how to harness that youth frustration through a kind of theatrical, proactive aggression.
Which brings us to our first case study, George Lincoln Rockwell and the aggression of what we'd now call trolling.
Yes, George Lincoln Rockwell and his American Nazi Party, the ANP, they were masters of this new proactive aggression. He founded it in 1959, and he explicitly rejected the timid mainstream right. He called Goldwater a kosher conservative and dismissed groups like the John Birch Society as just a bunch of cowards.
He didn't want political allies. He wanted soldiers.
You wanted soldiers. Rockwell actively sought to incorporate youth, seeing them as physically strong and fit members who were ready for action. His membership was often in their early 20s or even younger high school dropouts.
And Rockwell understood that the key to mobilizing this new generation wasn't just ideology. It was spectacle.
Completely. He embraced theatrical, absurd, proactive aggression, trolling, as you said. His goal was, and this is in his own words, to aggravate the Jews so bad that they would involuntarily give him the publicity he craved.
You know, that's a remarkable parallel to DCK. It's a low-risk, calculated action that's designed to achieve a high-impact, disruptive goal. And it uses cooperation and language theater, in this case, to strike at the alpha, which is the established order.
That's a fantastic insight. And the stunts were all designed for maximum ridicule and disruption. You had the infamous hate bus.
Right.
A Volkswagen van painted with slogans like, "We do hate race mixing." It was a direct mockery of the freedom rides. And young stormtroopers, like a 22-year-old named John Patler, drove this bus right into activist strongholds.
And the audacity just escalated from there, didn't it? There's a disturbing incident with a 21-year-old AMP captain, Robert Lloyd.
He ran onto the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives in blackface, yelling that he was the Mississippi delegation.
A deliberate public mockery of the Democratic National Convention efforts being led by figures like Fannie Lou Hamer.
It's cold, calculated performance art, and it was designed to shock and provoke, and it continued. John Patler, the same young man from the hate bus, he and Lloyd rushed an NAACP banquet.
What happened there?
They started yelling racial slurs and throwing these little slips of paper labeled free boat tickets to Africa into the crowd. They even released mice into the banquet hall to cause maximum panic and disruption.
It's so juvenile.
Yeah.
But it's also targeted and coordinated. It's the physical manifestation of group bullying.
It is. And then you had Andrew Chappell, at 25, running a highly publicized 50-mile run for the white race just to mock the anti-war peace walks. He was deliberately positioning the ANP as the party of youthful, superior fitness.
And the propaganda they created matched the absurdity of these stunts.
Oh, absolutely. Rockwell produced Hate Nanny records, featuring songs with titles like Ship Those Niggers Back. He published the Whiteman comics, often illustrated by John Patler, which served as this perfect power fantasy for young, immature audiences.
What exactly made those comics so effective in recruiting young people? Why did that work?
Well, they weren't serious ideological treatises. They were just filled with slurs, with Holocaust denial jokes, with scenes of cartoonish violence. The sources point out that this gave the ANP a kind of plausible deniability through humor.
Right. It's just a joke.
We're just trolling. But the actual function was to introduce the most extreme anti-Semitic and racist ideas to impressionable young people in a way that felt rebellious and fun. It normalized the abnormal.
And this strategy of calculated agitation, this proactive aggression using spectacle and ridicule, it reached a peak in 1966 in Chicago.
Yes. During Martin Luther King Jr.'s demonstrations there, a 23-year-old ANP member named Christopher Vinjevich successfully mobilized hundreds, maybe even thousands, of angry white residents, many of them teenagers.
And they heckled and assaulted King supporters.
They did. And they chanted the ANP battle cry, white power.
So Chicago really demonstrated that Rockwell's agitation strategy worked. It could mobilize masses of youth who were ready to transition very quickly to physical violence against what they perceived as the black slum invasion.
Rockwell saw this as phase one. He was preparing the ground for what he anticipated would be a violent and bloody revolution. He proved that proactive aggression, even in the form of low-level trolling, was the key to creating a militant youth coalition.
So if Rockwell focused on that theatrical agitation, our next case study, Willis Carto, focused on something different. Ideological fanaticism and consolidation, a much colder, more calculated form of proactive aggression aimed inward and enforcing the purity of the coalition.
That's right. Carto, who was the head of the Liberty Lobby, he was seeking a roadmap for revolution that was completely outside of mainstream politics, and he found it in a book called Imperium.
Tell us more about Imperium. It's not a widely known text, but it seems to have been profoundly influential in these particular circles.
It's a 600-page text written by a man named Francis Parker Yockey, and it's dedicated to the fallen German Nazi regime. It's lengthy, it's dense, and it is relentlessly anti-Semitic.
And what's a core thesis?
Its core thesis promoted Aryan racial supremacy, pan-European whiteness, and it claimed that Western culture's greatest mistake was liberal democracy. And crucially, it specifically excused Nazi Germany's atrocities during World War II, presenting them as necessary actions for cultural survival.
That's a serious ideological commitment. And Carto didn't just read it. You're saying he weaponized it.
He was completely captivated by it. He didn't just market the book. He created a secretive, clandestine organization, a Francis Parker Yockey movement, complete with code names and secret rituals.
And for that vision, he needed political foot soldiers.
Exactly. And in 1968, he co-opted the Youth for Wallace, or YFW, to be a front group.
And the YFW leaders, like 24-year-old John Arcord, they were initially just moderate conservatives. They were frustrated by the Goldwater failure and just wanted a more vigorous anti-communist student.
Right.
They were still interested in electoral politics.
They thought they were building a new political party. And Carto poured tens of thousands of dollars into them, but his ultimate goal was a proactive ideological takeover, an internal TCK against the moderate elements.
So what did he do?
First, he gave Accord a copy of Imperium to try to indoctrinate him. Then, in 1969, he staged a political coup at a YFW conference.
How was this coup executed? Was it physical?
No, it was calculated ideological violence. Carto's Yockey followers showed up at the conference and openly promoted Holocaust denial texts. They made these sick, calculated jokes discussing the final solution to the Jewish question and saying it would be more efficiently executed next time.
Just to shock them.
To shock the moderate YFW leaders with their open, extreme revolutionary goals.
So Accord and the original moderates were basically forced out, or they quit in revulsion. Carto used pure ideology, calculated extremity to enforce purity within its collective.
This takeover perfectly demonstrates the proactive use of aggression to maintain an ideological reverse dominance hierarchy. By imposing an extreme revolutionary goal based on Yaki's text, Carto purged the moderate elements, the weak links, or the potential tyrants of moderation, and he consolidated power onto a single extreme axis. The new organization, the National Youth Alliance, or NYA, became explicitly revolutionary.
So they completely shifted from challenging the left through political means to justifying violence against the system.
Exactly. The new NYA leadership immediately adopted intensely violent language. One of their newsletters proclaimed, "The day of black power savagery is over. If a few heads have to be split, so be it." They weren't talking about votes anymore. They were preparing for calculated conflict.
It seems like every step up this ladder of extremism is just a purer, colder application of proactive aggression. If Carto enforced ideological purity, the figure who really flipped the switch from street theater and ideological enforcement to outright paramilitary war was William Luther Pierce.
Pierce is the crucial transitional figure.
He moves from being an academic physicist to a shadow leader in the National Socialist White People's Party, and finally, to the revolutionary figurehead of the National Alliance.
Pierce completely rejected the fan club mentality of the older Nazis. He was relentlessly focused on turning rhetoric into tactical reality. He realized that the goal of the coalition couldn't just be agitation, it had to be action.
And he started providing the actual tools for proactive aggression very early on.
Yes. As early as 1968, he established a company called National Socialist Arms, or NS Arms. It sold riot guns and chemical mace, and it explicitly marketed them as Negro control equipment.
So he wasn't subtle about it.
Not at all. He urged white Virginians to stockpile weapons for what he viewed as the inevitable coming race war.
And he focused intensely on youth recruitment, understanding that the coalition needed young, action-oriented members, just as Rockwell had.
He targeted them precisely. Pierce recruited young men like James Mason, who joined at 14, and Joseph Tomasi, who joined at 15. And leveraging his scientific background, he provided them with intellectual mentorship and training. His publication, The White Power Message, included explicit calls for readers to take violent action, including the suggestion of killing black people on college campuses.
This all culminated when he took over the NYA from Carto in 1970 and transformed it into the National Alliance. This is where the training manual for modern terrorism really stood to take shape, isn't it?
That's the critical pivot. He transformed the NYA into a full-fledged military organization, focused entirely on revolutionary warfare. Their official newsletter, Attack, became the definitive platform for this calculated proactive aggression.
And he moved far past just general calls for conflict. He provided explicit tactical instruction. I mean, we are talking about detailed bomb-making instruction.
Absolutely. He ran a recurring series in the newsletter called Revolutionary Notes, which went into excruciating detail. It didn't just discuss ideology, it included hand-drawn diagrams showing how to properly construct medium-sized bombs.
Unbelievable.
He provided techniques for urban guerrilla warfare, instructing readers on how to connect detonators to commercial dynamite. He even specified how to store the bombs, for instance, in metal containers like a lunchbox, to ensure the shrapnel was effective upon detonation.
That is the ultimate, cold, calculated application of the TCK blueprint. Not just planning to kill one bully, but planning to commit mass terror against the entire social order.
And it was intentionally aimed at the youth. Pierce explicitly stated that the function of Attack was not to secure respectable right-wing contributions. He said it was to be an agitational and recruiting tool among young Americans, who were, in his words, itching for action that other groups cannot give them.
He was proactively seeking to militarize his reverse dominance hierarchy.
Exactly. And this philosophy immediately created a cascade of younger, even more militant groups. Joseph Tomasi, the 15-year-old that Pierce had mentored, he established the National Socialist Liberation Front, or NSLF, in 1969.
And he completely rejected slow political progress.
He wanted immediate guerrilla campaigns and street rebellions.
And then David Duke, another young activist who was connected to both Pierce and Tomasi, he recognized the tactical brilliance of using these proactive, aggressive recruitment methods, but in a larger, more established vehicle.
He did. In the 1970s, Duke took the Ku Klux Klan and repackaged Nazi tactics for it. He recycled racist comics, humor, provocative stunts from the Rockwell era, all to make the Klan feel more youth-oriented.
He lowered the barriers to entry.
A tactical use of coalition building. He opened membership to teenagers, women, and even Catholics, all to rapidly grow the movement using these cold, aggressive methods.
And this youth-driven revolutionary coalition finally came to a bloody head in Greensboro, North Carolina in 1979.
This was the culmination of everything we've been discussing. A coalition called the United Racist Front, which was comprised of Klansmen ideologically linked to Duke's repackaged KKK, and members of the National Socialist Party of America. They coordinated a violent, premeditated attack on anti-Klan marchers.
It was proactive aggression, planned well in advance. They arrived in a caravan, armed and ready. They confronted the communist organizers and were heard yelling, "You wanted the Klan, you communist son of a bitch! Well, you got the Klan!"
And the result was a premeditated massacre. They killed 5 leftist demonstrators. Greensboro marked the formal militarization and coalescence of the white power movement. It was proof that this calculated collective violence, this modern TCK, was now fully operational and lethal.
But William Pierce still had one final move to solidify the blueprint: literature. His novel, The Turner Diaries, which was serialized in Attack, served as the ultimate written instruction manual for mass terror.
The Turner Diaries is terrifying because it fuses white supremacist fantasy with practical how-to violence. It detailed a fictional, successful bombing of the FBI headquarters, killing 700 people. It wasn't just a story. It was a specific roadmap for revolutionary action that also addressed the core organizational weakness of the movement.
And that weakness was the need for a central alpha leader, a single point of failure.
Exactly. The novel solidified the concept of leaderless resistance. The idea that individuals or small cells could act autonomously based on a shared guiding ideology without needing a vulnerable, centralized alpha figure to command them.
The ideology itself became the organizing principle of the collective.
That's right. And this concept allowed the violence to scale infinitely, driven entirely by the ideological blueprint that Pierce distributed. This mechanism, cold, calculated, and disseminated through literature, reached its horrifying apex in 1995 with the Oklahoma City bombing.
Timothy McVeigh, the 25-year-old bomber, explicitly modeled his act after the FBI bombing sequence that was detailed in the Turner Diaries.
He carried pages from the book with him when he executed the calculated bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building. This is the undeniable proof that Pierce's fiction became the literal tactical mechanism for coalitionary proactive aggression aimed squarely at the state.
And Pierce, true to his role as the ideological engine of this new RDH, he refused to condemn the attack.
He commended McVeigh as a soldier and argued that if one is trying to save the whole race, then a bombing on the scale of Oklahoma City is morally justified. He provided the ideology, the training, and the complete moral framework for mass murder, the ultimate modern expression of cold, collective violence.
What this entire journey reveals is the profound and frankly disturbing power of our evolutionary history. Our entire morality, our entire social structure, it's rooted in this ancient mechanism of coordinated proactive aggression, the group conspiring to kill the bully.
And that mechanism, TCK, established the reverse dominance hierarchy. It's what created civility by punishing non-conformity.
And the same fundamental blueprint of coalitionary premeditated violence, a mechanism that requires advanced language, planning, and cooperation to achieve a deadly calculated outcome, was later successfully repurposed and scaled up in the modern era by extremist groups.
They simply substituted the original alpha male with the system, or liberal tyranny.
The pattern remains the same: collective, cold, calculated violence. This is the enduring goodness paradox.
And the shocking success and longevity of these modern violent movements stem directly from their ability to master this uniquely human trait, proactive aggression. It's a mechanism that changed the very fabric of our species by making us docile enough to live together, but deadly enough to conspire against any perceived tyrant.